Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watch One, and thanks for logging on. Today, we're looking at the Panerai Luminor 1950 Days Power Reserve PAM 423, 47 millimeters in the modern Panerai 1950 style case, polished stainless steel. This is a nostalgic watch on two levels. First and foremost, of course, it recalls the 1950 variant of the original Panerai 6152 case, that evolved Panerai combat dive watch issued to the Italian Naval Special Forces from 1950 onward. More gracefully sculpted, more compound curves, bigger, and more robust than the early Radiomir or 3646, the 1950 joined the modern Panerai catalog back in 2002 with the famous PAM 127 50. But this watch, the PAM 423, not only references that golden era of the Panerai combat diver, but the 2000s, when Panerai as a collector watch phenomenon was really coming into its own, and references with the so-called caliber OP9 based on the Valjoux 7750 with its off-center power reserve at 430 were becoming popular among the Paneristi collectors. These are older models like the PAM 90, the 124, the 125, the 126, and the 222 Regatta. So this PAM 423 1950 Luminor 3 Days really evokes both of those episodes of memorable Panerai watches, the historic era of the combat watches and the modern era of the Panerai civilian luxury watches. Now, on my wrist, you can see the 1950 case definitely lives up to its reputation. Bigger, more elaborately sculpted. This isn't the tuna can that debuted in 1993 when Panerai first hit the civilian market. In other words, this is not the so-called Betterini cushion case, but it is a cushion case. And it's a beautiful one. This is befitting Panerai's modern reputation as a luxury watch manufacturer and a true manufacturer of all aspects of the watch. My wrist is 6 1/3 inches, 16 centimeters in circumference, and the watch reads big, but it doesn't wear big. There's nothing overbearing about it because with that sculpted 1950 case, you can see the portion of the case back actually in contact with my wrist is quite limited, really, nicely curved. I'm not getting the full impact of a huge watch on my wrist. I'm getting a relatively small contact patch that spreads its mass nicely. And although the crown guard is imposing, if you have no prior experience with Panerai Luminor watches, that might be a little bit off-putting. Rest assured, it's really not an obstruction. It's in no way an encumbrance on the movement of my wrist. It doesn't dig skin. It's very comfortable. Remember, this was originally designed for the no-nonsense world of military ergonomics. This is something you can wear comfortably on your wrist of any size for a good long time. One of the features that really distinguished the 1950 case from the earlier Panerai references was just how much more beautifully sculpted it was. Rather than simply shaped, the 2002 to present Panerai 1950 case brings out the best of the company's heritage. While the old 44mm case that launched with the company in '93 definitely helped to establish the company's name and reputation, it was with the 1950 that the watch really came into its own, both embracing its heritage in as much as the original 1950 case did look like this, but also elevating the level of fit and finish. And you can see with high polish, beautiful blended seams, and a higher quality crown guard on several levels, and I'll explain that in a minute. The 1950 really brings out the best of modern Panerai while respecting the history. Now, the crown guard is the highlight of any Panerai Luminor, and I want to emphasize that this one, in brushed stainless steel, reads as a separate component from the case and the bezel, which are polished. It sits apart as a separate element, but it's also a refined version of the original. And you can see inside that little cam that locks the crown, it has the built-in runner bearing that was introduced in 2007 across the line of Panerai watches with the crown guard, and that allows the watch to open and close the locking lever with greater fluidity, ease. It's no longer a scraping, grating feeling, but more of a glide. And that famed locking lever is just as ingenious today as it was when first patented in 1956. You can pull the crown out, and you see when I pull the crown, it does in fact stop the balance, hacks it for synchronization to a reference time, and you can wind the watch without any kind of unscrewing as you would have to do on a Rolex Oyster case or any screw-down crown, Omega or Breitling. That was Panerai's innovation for the sake of convenience. It's also quite practical because, let's face it, if you are going to be getting wet, if your hands are sweaty, if you're wearing a glove, it's going to be easier to manipulate a crown that doesn't need to be screwed out from a tight position, and it's always easy to raise the locking lever so you can access that crown. Plus, full all-aspect protection. The crown guard is not just an ingenious method for mounting the cam lever, it's also a very robust, all-encompassing protection for the crown itself. And that's useful whether you're combat diving or just diving off the high dive. And the bottom line is that this watch does respect Panerai history inboard of the case and the bezel as well. All aspects of that famed sandwich dial are here recreated. Now the sandwich dial is a loomed disc that forms the base of the assembly. A stencil featuring the indices and the numerals is then placed over that. So what you're actually seeing is a very thick layer of superluminova luminant material, and this construction is true to the originals, 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, and you get an incredible depth, you get an incredible luminescence, almost torch-like at night. But what makes this one different from other heavily loomed watches is, first and foremost, with the depth of those stenciled channels, you get a little bit of a 3D effect when it glows at night, and second, because this watch does evoke Panerai's history on so many levels, the company has seen fit to use its dirty dial treatment, or a simulated radium patina. You can see how the watch has sort of an ecru color within each index, within each numeral, and of course inset to the rose gold hands, and that's designed to evoke the simulated aged radium look. It is something you'll see on all vintage Panerai dive watches from the 30s, 40s, and 50s that are intact. Over time, the radium will age the lume. It'll lose its luminescent effect, but it'll acquire a beautiful, aged, weathered, dark, rich tone, just like you see here. This is the best of both worlds because this still works as luminescent material, but you get that weathered look. It's nice. It's a nice companion to the rose gold hands. Very high quality, high polish, as well as this distressed leather calfskin strap with a corresponding simulated aged off-white or cream-colored thread. It's the same kind of ecru color as the lume itself. This is a very holistic, fully realized design. Respects Panerai history on multiple levels. Like I said, the modern, with the fit and the finish and the off-center power reserve, as well as the heritage, with the dirty dial, the 1950 case, and the corresponding simulated aged leather and thread. It's a real good looker on the wrist. Now the other thing I want to emphasize is that Panerai, as I alluded earlier, is a manufacturer now. Building their own movements, they have been since the mid-2000s. Right about 2005, toward the tail end of the year, they started rolling out their first in-house calibers. And this one that you see right here, the caliber 3002, features everything that Panerai has learned about making movements since the middle of that decade. First and foremost, this thing is tough. Whereas the ancestral Panerai dive watches used delicate pocket watch calibers generally supplied by Rolex, the modern Panerai watches really spare no expense in designing the movements for the way people wear sports watches in the 21st century, that is Rolex style, all the time and without mercy. So you get a dual-anchored balance bridge, not the single-sided cantilevered balance cock that you'll see in a vintage watch. With dual anchoring, it better isolates the balance from shocks. And you get a free-sprung regulator. Basically what that means is the index, the regulator itself, is fixed. So there are actual nuts on the balance wheel itself, and you move them in and out to change the moment of inertia to adjust the watch. So if you do shock the watch, if it does take a knock, that little index, which can move on a conventional movement and change the rate of the balance, it's fixed in place. It just holds the stud, it just anchors the hairspring. All the adjustments are done on the wheel itself. So you've got that full balance bridge, and you've got the free-sprung escapement. Very tough. You also have an homage to Panerai's history in the simulated three-quarter bridge. Now for maintenance and easy access to the mainspring barrels, two of them, which are located on this side under this barrel bridge, and the train, the drivetrain of the watch, located under this bridge, and you can see the jewels of the train right there. But Panerai designs them to read as one unit, just like the ancestral Rolex Codebert and Angelus pocket watch movements used in the original Panerai divers. A simple, straight-grained dressage treatment, just like the old watches, is applied, and it fits, because these watches are supposed to be built to a modern luxury standard, but at the same time they aren't supposed to completely lose touch with the blue-collar origins of Panerai as a watchmaker and a military supplier. 3-day power reserve with an indicator on the dial, hacking seconds for precise synchronization to a reference time, and of course the watch features that convenient independent hour hand that can be set in 1-hour increments separate from the minute hand if you're jumping forward or backwards through separate time zones. It's tough, it's contemporary, It's beautifully, if simply finished, and it's also quite a vision in as much as whether you're in love with the history of Panerai, the 30s, the 40s, and the 50s, or you were part of the modern phenomena in the early 2000s to mid-2000s, this Panerai Luminor 1953 Day Power Reserve PAM 423 has something to offer, and you can see it on our website, Watch You Want.